The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
Welcome to the Formed Book Club. We continue to discuss Orthodoxy by J.K. Chesterton. We're on page 94. This is part of chapter 6, a crucial chapter called The Paradox of Christianity. But I think we need to start at the bottom of 93, where he says, last paragraph, I think a third case is strangest of all because it involves the one real objection to faith. The one real objection to the Christian religion is simply that it is one religion. So, because I'm sucking on a lozenge to try and mitigate or obviate a cough, Joseph, I'm going to really turn this over to you completely now and let you go forward.
Okay, well, the next thing I actually have is towards the top of page 95. So please,
if I may, I'd like to comment on that quote. If I may,
please. I was going to say,
okay.
I was about to say, but please interject if you have anything before that. So yes, please interject.
Well, it might escape people that this one real objection is that it's one religion. You know, even when the faithful were being persecuted in ancient Rome, the Romans would have been perfectly happy if they had wanted to put Jesus in the pantheon. Like, what's one more guy, God, whatever, stick him in here, we're all good. But no, you see, it was because the Christians were insistent that there was none other but God Almighty we should be worshiping, not the emperor, not this God, not that goddess. Jesus is not just one among many. He is the one and only God incarnate. And it was that inflexibility that got them into so much trouble, and we are often accused of that. Why are you so rigid?
It pays yourself right down through the ages, because obviously if you have that exclusive understanding of religion, as there is one God, one true God, and as in that God is a Holy Trinity incarnate in Jesus Christ, then you're never going to be comfortable trying to dovetail that with any form of relativism.
That's right.
And secularists, generally speaking, Caesar and his various manifestations are always relativists. They just want to be utilitarian. What's going to work here? Let's be practical. Let's be pragmatic, right? Let's not get principle get in the way of pragmatism. Well, that's why the church is always, if you like, going to be biting its head against the world, because the world is happy with relativism, and the church is not allowed to be relativist.
Right. Which doesn't mean that we can't acknowledge truth wherever it might be found, and glimmers of this and shadows of that, and look at, to try to retrieve everything out of the world that's retrievable. That doesn't mean that we can't do that and do that and should do that in evangelizing the world. But at the end of the day, God is one.
At the end of the day, you can't accept the equality of Jesus with all the other religious figures.
Right.
Yeah,
so anyway.
Yeah. It's not one religion amongst many. Okay, so I said the next thing I have is towards the top of page 95, but if either of you have anything on 94, please fire away. No? Okay, well, that first new paragraph at the top of page 95 there, this began to be alarming. It looked not so much as if Christianity was bad enough to include any vices, but rather as if any stick were good enough to beat Christianity with. What again could this astonishing thing be like, which people were so anxious to contradict that in doing so, they did not mind contradicting themselves? Which I get, that's not just Chesterton at his best, but the point is really just as quite clear that what people were interested in was not winning an argument, but defeating the enemy, which is not the same thing, right? Because one requires reason and the other just requires picking up a stick and using it in whatever way you like.
Yeah, I think in Everlasting Man, he used an example that some said this man was too tall. Others said he was too short. Some said he was too fat. Others said too thin. He must be a very amazing man,
Yes.
Exactly. And this is just page 95. This is just really repeating what he's been given these examples. But I think it's worth just reiterating, especially as it was last week, before last time we talked about it. Same page, 95, 2/3 of the way down. Christianity was reproached with its naked and hungry habits, with its sackcloth and dried peas. But the next minute, Christianity is being reproached with its pomp and its ritualism, its shrines of porphyry and its robes of gold. It was abused for being too plain and for being too coloured. So another one of those examples where either stick will do. The church, if the church is poor and wears sackcloth, it's too negative, it's too ascetic. And if it's building beautiful cathedrals, it's too rich and it's too aesthetic. Either way, it's going to be criticised.
Right. Now it's interesting. On the top of page 98, he points out that this is not to say that Christianity, this is where the quote picks up, was merely sensible and stood in the middle. It's interesting how he's doing this. He's showing how Christianity is being criticized from one side or the other for this extreme, and then contradictorily for this other extreme. But it's not as though Christianity is just somehow some mean in the middle of all of this. And now he's going to go on and develop this argument, which kind of comes as a surprise. You're thinking he's going in one direction, and next thing you know, he takes a turn, Chesterton, that is, and goes in another.
I love the quote at the top of page 96. This opportunity to be a real conversation. A free thinker, so basically a relativist, a friend of mine, blamed Christianity for despising Jews and then despised it himself for being Jewish, which I love. That's another example of the self-contradiction in trying to point out the so-called contradictions of Christianity.
Right.
Catholicism.
And so if I may go back to 98 again, so it's not some sort of middle way that Christianity is. He says there had been this combination, this is sort of the middle of the top there, this combination between two almost insane positions which somehow amounted to a sanity. What he's getting at here is that these paradoxes, these apparent contradictions, this being able to be attacked with any stick of any size by anyone for something or another, that there's somehow a sanity to it all, not just a sort of middle, like a compromise of the middle, but a sanity that goes beyond any other sanity.
Yeah.
And
at the middle of the page, he kind of sums it up. Then the most difficult and interesting part of the mental process opened, and I began to trace this idea darkly through all the enormous thoughts of our theology. The idea was that which I had outlined touching the optimists and the pessimists. We want not an amalgam or compromise, you said, but both things at the top of their energy. Love and wrath both burning.
Yes.
Here I shall
only
trace it in relation to ethics, but I need not remind the reader that the idea of this combination is indeed central to Orthodox theology. For Orthodox theology especially insists that Christ was not a being apart from God and man, like an elf, nor yet a being half human and half not, like a centaur, but both things at once and both things thoroughly, very man and very God. Yeah.
Yep.
Very good.
I love this. I just love so much. Love and wrath both burning, because in God, they're the same. And this is what's so hard for us to understand. We put these things on opposite poles. And in fact, for God, this burning, it's a love that's going to burn so fiercely, it's going to burn away everything that is not of love.
Right. So these things are, I love that, and I love the fact that he brings it down to the incarnation there. That this is an apparent contradiction that points to a deeper truth, right? The definition of paradox. That the church is not a contradiction in the sense that it's two mutually exclusive things, but on the contrary, it's both those things that you don't normally see together, because it transcends and supersedes the mundane. And so, that's wonderful encapsulation there by bringing the incarnation in as the perfect encapsulation of the church being both and, not either or.
Or something in the middle. And so this was very interesting to me, because it seems as though he's sort of, any of us who've studied Aristotelian ethics or whatever. It's the golden mean. It's the middle between two extremes. The virtue is to be found in the middle between these two extremes. And Chesterton is actually pushing on this just a little bit, like, let's not be too quick with a formula here, because look at what he does with on page 99. Paganism declared that virtue was in a balance. Christianity declared it was in a conflict, the collision of two passions apparently opposite. So then he goes down and says, courage is almost a contradiction in terms. It means a strong desire to live, taking the form of a readiness to die. He that loses his life, the same shall save it. It's not a piece of mysticism for saints and heroes. It is a piece of everyday advice for sailors or mountaineers. It might be printed in an alpine guide or a drill book. This paradox is the whole principle of courage. And a few lines down, a soldier surrounded by enemies, if he is to cut his way out, needs to combine a strong desire for living with a strange carelessness about dying. Now, I have to say, I absolutely love the Nicomachean Ethics. I absolutely love Aristotle going through, courage is the mean between
cowardice and foolhardiness.
And foolhardiness, right? And here, Chesterton comes through here and just like, it's almost as if he's throwing all the things up in the air and they land in a different arrangement from what you've seen before, how you understood it or looked at it before. It's just so delightful the way he does this.
Yeah, there's a wonderful metaphor that Dorothy L. Sayers uses about Chesterton's influence upon keeping her a Christian. She was not a convert; she was a lifelong Anglican. But she implies she was in danger of losing her faith. And then she discovers Chesterton. She said that Chesterton, like a beneficent bomb, blew out a great deal of stained glass window of very poor, very questionable quality, and then danced with all the indecorum of a lady's juggler, something like that, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it is wonderful. It is wonderful, and one of the things that it accomplishes is that it gets you to jolt up in your chair and pay attention. Like you think you know where he's going. Oh, yes, I understand what he's saying. Oh, yes, read this before. No, Chesterton doesn't give you that leisure. He forces you to sit up and take notice and say, what did he just write? And really make you think. It's such a gift.
That's why we're taking so long to go through this book, because we're treating it with the care that it demands, right? Because otherwise, you're being glib with something which is absolutely profound. And what's the point of that?
Yes, indeed.
Next I have is at the bottom of page 101, but I'm sure one or other of you will have something before then.
Well, just in the middle of the page there.
Which page, Father?
101, just above the new paragraph there. Christianity got over the difficulty of combining fierce opposites by keeping them both and keeping them both furious.
Yeah.
The church is positive in both points. One can hardly think too little of oneself. One can hardly think too much of one's soul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, that's. I mean, you could probably spend an hour in front of the Blessed Sacrament meditating what you've just read there, because what's the difference between oneself and one's soul? And that would furnish you with more than enough mystical musing in front of the Blessed Sacrament. So at the bottom of the page there,
go ahead.
So just the last few lines. Christianity came in startlingly with a sword and clove one thing from another. It divided the crime from the criminal. The criminal we must forgive unto 70 times 7. The crime we must not forgive at all. And again, another absolute paradox, because we've all got friends that are living problematic lives, perhaps sexually, for instance. And you say to them, well, all sexual activity outside of marriage is a sin. And it sounds as if you're being sort of uncharitable, right? But it doesn't mean one iota you don't love them fully as a brother or sister, and you love them as much as the saint next door. You love the sinner as much as the saint. But that doesn't. But you're not going to condone the sin, right?
Right.
I got one at the top, page 102. Let's have something before that, Joseph.
I've got things on 102, but fire away, Father.
Just the last 3 lines of the paragraph beginning of the page. And the more I considered Christianity, the more I found that while it established a rule and order, the chief aim of that order was to give room for good things to run wild.
Yeah.
And is the image in Everlasting Man about the boys, children playing on the top of an island? It's got cliffs on all sides, and they got a fence around them.
But if it's not in here, it must be the Everlasting Man, because you and I discuss it in class, and they're the 2 books we discuss. But I can't remember which one it is, to be honest with you. But that wonderful imagery of having to have a fence near the precipice so that we can play, rather than being huddled in the middle.
And someone said, let's get rid of these rules, these dogmas, these regulations. Take down the fence, and the children are huddled in the center of the island. We can't play anymore.
Right, exactly.
And so that's the image. That's the image of Catholic moral doctrine, to show you what the fence is. Not that you can't have any fun, but that you can actually run wild
inside the fence.
Inside the fence.
And also another metaphor getting at the same thing is one that is used in this book, the metaphor of the key. All right. Now a key is precise, it's also small, but it unlocks a door. And without that key, you're locked in a small space. We use that door, and you move into a much larger space, the space of the goodness, truth, and beauty provided by Orthodoxy. But you have to use the key. Right? You can't just say, well, I'm going to use a stick and see if I can get what I want that way. You're not going to be able to open the door.
Mm-hmm.
I have something towards the bottom of page 102.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is, again, a so-called contradiction. St. Francis, in praising all good, could be more shouting optimist than Walt Whitman. St. Jerome, in denouncing all evil, could paint the world blacker than Schopenhauer. Both passions were free because both were kept in their place. So basically, St. Francis's optimism, his praise of all of God's creation, brother sun and sister moon and the rest of it, he nonetheless knew the ugliness of sin, and that very canticle to brother sun ends be, I can't remember the exact quote, but woe to him who's in mortal sin, right? So the reason that St. Francis can be optimistic is because he's Orthodox, and Jerome, right, can be as negative as you like, but he knows the beauty of virtue, right? And so that these apparent contradictions between St. Francis and St. Jerome are not contradictions at all. They're differences in emphases, right? That one is caricaturing this particular aspect of things, and the other's caricaturing the other aspect of things, but they both agree ultimately in the objectivity of things.
It's like Joan of Arc or Therese of Lisieux, Joan of Arc is out in battle there, Ray Milton. This is in a convent, a pacifist in a sense.
And yet, Therese dressed up as St. Joan.
That's right.
Inside the convent, they would put on little plays to amuse each other, the sisters, and she chose to dress up as St. Joan. She saw herself every bit as much as a spiritual warrior.
Yes.
And so, yes, so these things it isn't even as though these things don't exist in the one that we paint as the example of the other. They all exist in every Christian, but in slightly different ways, slightly different
if
tones.
You're this side of the door, so to speak, if you're inside the church as opposed to outside the church looking in, you're inside looking out and within. All Catholics are completely at home with all the saints, irrespective of their different apostolates or their different mysticisms or their different approaches. None of us are uncomfortable with any of them, because we know that they are all completely and utterly unified and united in the thing called Orthodoxy. Right.
Although, I don't want St. John the Baptist showing up at my barbecue.
Well, not even during Lent.
Okay, during Lent. Okay.
Yeah. A barbecue locust?
Yeah. No, I'm sort of teasing. In other words, as sinners, we do sometimes feel uncomfortable around the saints, right? Because they do shed light on the places we know we still we still need some help with. But
I mean,
but
you
you're
use Paul's metaphor of the running the race, the finishing line. I mean, it's like you're the start of a 100-meter sprint, and there's 8 people there. You're in lane 8. The other 7 are saints. They all take off and they get there in 10 seconds. And you're plodding along, like getting there in
right,
15 or 16 if you're lucky. I mean, we're
right.
not athletes perhaps, but we know the purpose of the race, and we just hope to God that God will allow those who come in last, as long as they cross the finishing line, right?
Right.
Maybe
And
the
they're
last
cheering
goes first, you know?
us on. Let's not forget. They're cheering us
Exactly,
on. They are our friends. They are helping us.
exactly.
That's right. They'll come back and push us over the line, maybe too. Go ahead, Joseph.
Well, I had things highlighted that also crossed out on page 104 and 105 because when the point of view, I'm not as keen on talking about them, so I'm happy to pass those over. The next thing I have is on page 106, so I don't know if you have things before that.
I'm happy to go to 106. What about you?
I am, and also I think Joseph will need to read, for my benefit, most of page 107 and the final page. I mean, these are some of the most memorable phrases or sentences of Chesterton, even beginning on 106 at the middle. But go ahead, get started on it, Joseph.
Sure. Well, I'm actually going to begin at the beginning of that new paragraph, page 106. Read the first couple of sentences. Actually, might only just be one sentence because it's Chesterton. No, it's 2. Last and most important, it is exactly this which explains what is so inexplicable to all the modern critics of the history of Christianity. I mean, the monstrous wars about small points of theology, the earthquakes of emotion about a gesture or a word. It was only a matter of an inch, but an inch is everything when you are balancing. And this metaphor, and I like, about I've written the margin here, the point of truth, right? The truth is an exact thing. It's like a mathematical point. It is, right? And that's exactly what it is. It isn't something else, right? So if someone tries to suggest that which is true is actually something else, you have to say no. And you have to say no with whatever forcefulness is required to defend the point of truth from those who say it's somewhere else than where it actually is.
I want you to continue, but I want to go back up in the 10 lines prior to where you began there on page 106, where he says patriotism is a perfect example of this deliberate balancing of one emphasis against another emphasis. You think of the pagan empire would have said, you shall all be Roman citizens and grow alike. Let the German grow less slow and reverent. Let the Frenchman less experimental and swift. But the instant Christian Europe says, let the German remain slow and reverent. Let the Frenchman maybe the more safely be swift and experimental. We will make an equipoise out of these excesses. I love this summary. The absurdity called Germany shall correct the insanity called France. That's a great way.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's a little bit as it's being written by an Englishman.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to restrain myself from sort of making some glib comment.
Yes.
Well, continue reading where you left off. We'll comment as you read.
Okay, so you mean from the church?
Yeah, once that the idea become less powerful.
Oh, okay.
You
want me to read to the end of the chapter?
I want to read to the end of the whole chapter. We'll comment as you go.
So you'll stop me as you need to.
Sure.
Okay. Once let one idea become less powerful, and some other idea would become too powerful. It was no flock of sheep the Christian shepherd was leading, but a herd of bulls and tigers, of terrible ideals and devouring doctrines, each one of them strong enough to turn to a false religion and lay waste the world. Remember that the church went in specifically for dangerous ideas. She was a lion tamer. The idea of birth through a Holy Spirit, of the death of a divine being, of the forgiveness of sins, or the fulfillment of prophecies, are ideas which anyone can see need but a touch to turn them to something blasphemous or ferocious. The smallest link was let drop by the artificers of the Mediterranean, and the lion of ancestral pessimism burst his chain in the forgotten forests of the north. Of these theological equalizations I have to speak afterwards. Here it is enough to notice that if some small mistake were made in doctrine, huge blunders might be made in human happiness. A sentence phrased wrong about the nature of symbolism would have broken all the best statues in Europe. A slip in the definitions might stop all the dances, might wither all the Christmas trees or break all the Easter eggs. Doctrines had to be defined within strict limits, even in order that man might enjoy general human liberties. The church had to be careful, if only that the world might be careless.
Yeah, we can stop there for a moment. That he makes these references up above to what actually happened in Europe with the pessimism of the North and the iconoclasm that took place, and Christmas and dancing being outlawed. All these things happened, but he said the church had to have that balance. So
I've just finished rereading The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and that's obviously set in Puritan New England, and that's exactly shows where Christianity's gone mad because it's no longer orthodox.
So let's read that final paragraph. This is I can't read it without weeping, so I have to have you do it, Joseph.
Okay. This is the thrilling romance of orthodoxy. People have fallen into a foolish habit of speaking of orthodoxy as something heavy, humdrum, and safe. There never was anything so perilous or so exciting as orthodoxy. It was sanity, and to be sane is more dramatic than to be mad. It's with the equilibrium of a man behind madly rushing horses, seeming to stoop this way and to sway that, yet in every attitude having the grace of statuary and the accuracy of arithmetic. The church in its early days went fierce and fast with any war horse, yet it is utterly unhistoric to say that she merely went mad along one idea, like a vulgar fanaticism. She swerved to left and right, so exactly as to avoid enormous obstacles. She left on one hand the huge bulk of Arianism, buttressed by all the worldly powers to make Christianity too worldly. The next instant she was swerving to avoid an Orientalism, which would have made it too unworldly. The Orthodox Church never took the tame course or accepted the conventions. The Orthodox Church was never respectable. It would have been easier to have accepted the earthly power of the Arians. It would have been easy in the Calvinistic 17th century to fall into the bottomless pit of predestination. It is easy to be a madman. It is easy to be a heretic. It is always easy to let the age have its head. The difficult thing is to keep one's own. It is always easy to be a modernist, as it is easy to be a snob. To have fallen into any of those open traps of error and exaggeration, which fashion after fashion and sect after sect set along the historic path of Christendom, that would indeed have been simple. It is always simple to fall. There are an infinity of angles at which one falls, only one at which one stands. To have fallen into any one of the fads, from Gnosticism to Christian Science, would indeed have been obvious and tame. But to have avoided them all has been one whirling adventure, and in my vision, the heavenly chariot flies thundering through the ages, the dull heresy sprawling and prostrate, the wild truth reeling but erect.
Yeah, what an image.
That's glorious.
That's
glorious.
a glorious, glorious paragraph.
Well, why don't we conclude there? It's the end of the chapter. It's a beautiful end of that chapter. It's a passage worth remembering and repeating and writing down. But we'll continue in the next episode with chapter 7, the Eternal Revolution. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumedbookclub.ignatius.com.